Greetings and welcome to Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation. To our members, friends, and everyone joining us in our virtual congregation on YouTube today.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Robin Landerman Zucker, minister of this congregation, and I will be hosting our virtual worship today on YouTube with Worship Associate Linda Ochi and with music from Roomie and Rebecca Prizznick. Today is January 10th, 2021. We're glad you're here and that you have made Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation a part of this day in your spiritual life. We're glad you're here if you're a regular viewer or if you're tuning in for the first time. We're here every week on YouTube and we'll be at home at 510 North LaRue Street in Flagstaff as soon as it is safe to gather in person. Our congregation is spiritually open and intentionally inclusive. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you are always welcome here, and we will joyfully marry you here as well. Our members and friends bring many interests, theologies, and viewpoints to our door, and here we trust that you will find a common desire for meaningful community and spiritual growth, and for relevant religious exploration in a framework with very, very flexible borders. Membership in this congregation is open to anyone who chooses to walk with us in the spirit of love, the search for truth, and the pursuit of justice. As I light the chalice, the symbol of our free faith, please light your own chalice or candle at home as we recite the unison words you see on your screen. We light this chalice with a flame that draws us together. With this flame, we cut through the darkness of isolation and are warmed by the fires of our inner connection. The mission and covenant of Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation express our values and our vision of ourselves as a gathered community in the world. Please say the mission and covenant with me. You will see the words on your screen. The mission of Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation is to be a welcoming community that embraces diverse thought and belief and builds a just, peaceful, and compassionate world. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in kindness. Thus do we covenant. The opening words I chose for today, as I said, January 10th, 2021, are not only appropriate for an early January service in which we're focusing on our blessed imperfection and all those resolutions we tend to make, but it's also very appropriate in the wake of the turmoil and violence in our country, particularly what we saw earlier this week. So I've chosen these opening words for us, a poem called Fresh and Clean by Bella Ruth Nabersteck. Just give me this, a rinsing out, a cleansing free of all my smaller strivings, so that I can be a class act, true to my purpose, all of my energy aligned behind my deepest intention. And just this, a quieting down, a clearing away of internal ruckus, so that I can hear the huge stillness in my heart and feel how I pulse with all creation, part and parcel of the great singing ocean. And this too, a willingness to notice and forgive the myriad times I fall short, forgetting who I really am, what I really belong to. So I can start over, fresh and clean, like sweet sheets billowing in the summer sun, my heart pierced with gratitude.
Please join me in singing For All That Is Our Life. life we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Each week in our service, members and friends are invited to share personal joys and sorrows in the supportive fellowship of this community. This week, I want to hold up a simple stone, a stone of hope. If you received a sanctuary care package, you have a hope stone, and we still have some here at 510 North LaRue Street, so reach out to me if you still haven't gotten yours. But this week, again, because of what has gone on in our country, we have both the joy of the election in Georgia and the certification of Biden and Harris's win in the election. We also have the sorrow of what happened in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. So this is a stone of hope for all of us here in Flagstaff, in America, and throughout the world. In a moment, you will have some space to speak your personal joys and sorrows into the silence. And also at 11 a.m. on Sundays, we do have a live Zoom post-service gathering. And you can share joys and sorrows in real time every week in that gathering, reflect on the service, and just touch base with one another while we're in this virtual mode. So in the spirit of peace and hope, let us be silent and speak our joys and sorrows into that space, knowing it's being held by the community. And I offer this prayer, written on Wednesday, January 6th, by my colleague, the Reverend Claire Feingold Thorin. She writes, "Spirit of life, hear our cry. Restore and heal our democracy, our nation, our government, our people. Bring peaceful strength to the hands of those protecting our capital. Bring safety to our lawmakers and all those who came to work in our nation's capital with their eyes on truth and justice. Bring righteous and meaningful consequences to those who choose terrorism, hatred, racism, white supremacy, and violence. Bring repentance, bring justice to the ones who incited this violence. Spirit of life, we cry out in the face of this mob attack on the place sacred to many and the people respected by many who gathered to carry out the Constitution. Heal us, heal our nation, heal our people. Please help us choose love and justice and unity. Please help us lift up the good and strike down what is evil. Be with us, Spirit of Life, in our devastation and our fear and our resolve. See us through this day and this night and the weeks ahead. Amen. And now I invite you into that space where we do intentional breathing together. So I invite you to put down whatever you're holding and uncross your arms and legs and sit up straight in a chair or wherever you are and close your eyes and just breathe. It's that simple. 4 beats in through your nose slowly, 5 to 6 beats out through your mouth slowly, in and out in a steady rhythm, slow and intentional, feeling how you can create spaciousness, starting with the crown of your head and moving down your body to your feet that are rooted to the earth. Breath is your personal first aid. You take it everywhere you go. So breathe and allow. Let's breathe together.
Our reading is The Layers by Stanley Kunitz. I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides, from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I am compelled to look, before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites, over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exalting somewhat, with my will intact, to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered, and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me, live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes.
I can almost see it, that dream I'm dreaming, but there's a voice inside my head saying, you'll never reach it. Every step I'm taking, every move I make feels lost with no direction. My faith is shaken, but I gotta keep trying. Gotta keep my head held high. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. The struggles I'm facing, the chances I'm taking, sometimes might knock me down, but no, I'm not breaking. I may not know it, but these are the moments that I'm gonna remember most. Just gotta keep going, and I gotta be strong. Just keep pushing on, 'cause there's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's a climb. Keep moving, keep climbing, keep the faith. It's all about the climb.
My sermon today is entitled Shove Over, a Sermon Towards Blessed Imperfection. During my divinity school days, some years back, I sat down for a friendly, informal lunch with a colleague named Tom. His sandwich came, as cafeteria sandwiches often do, with a small bag of generic potato chips and a pickle. As we chatted, he ripped open the bag and lifted a potato chip to his lips, and then he stopped, examined the chip intently, and just began to chuckle. Naturally, a bit puzzled, I wanted to know, what is so funny about your potato chip, Tom? And then it all spilled out, the tale of one of the wackiest and most unintentionally profound moments in his burgeoning ministry. Sometime the previous summer, he tells me, a wedding was being planned at the church where he was the intern and he was to officiate. And through my marriage ministry, I know a lot about weddings and wedding snafus, so I was really game to hear this tale. The mother of the bride, a bit of a perfectionist Martha Stewart type and a definite candidate for what we might call the perfect club, had every detail covered, from the amount of fresh air to filter through the windows, to the color coordination of flowers to pew cushions. I kid you not. She even wondered if Tom owned a stole that might better match the color scheme. Needless to say, she was driving everyone, including Tom, a bit loopy with her perfectionism. The wedding day dawned, bright and clear and promising in a small New England town. The ceremony began without a hitch, and the mother of the bride settled triumphantly into her seat in the front row. Then, during the vows, the back door of the sanctuary swung open like a set of saloon doors, and through it stepped a man named Joe, dressed in a disheveled ensemble of clothing and wearing a snorkel mask. Well, he was known to the church and to Tom since he lived in a nearby socialization center for folks who had recently resettled into the community from a mental health facility. He was a harmless, if quirky fellow who often stopped by the church to chat with Tom and hustle some potato chips from the stash in the kitchen. Tom looked up right in the middle of the to-haves and have-nots, and as Joe started marching down the aisle, past bewildered guests toward the front of the church in the chancel, and Tom just kept on with the vows. Then Joe stopped at the front pew, gazed down through his snorkel mask at the startled mother of the bride, and proclaimed, "Shove over." At first, she didn't respond. She couldn't respond. She looked up at him horrified, and then at her husband sitting on her right. "Shove over," Joe repeated. The look on the mother of the bride's face, Tom recalls, was a pungent mixture of astonishment, defiance, and pleading. But she did finally shove over to make room for Joe. And the wedding proceeded, and she dabbed her eyes with her husband's color-coordinated handkerchief as Joe sat serenely next to her in the pew, enchanted by the beautiful bride, made even more dewy by his misty snorkel mask view. Well, Tom knew what Joe wanted after all, just potato chips. So during the musical interlude, Tom relayed a message to that effect through a groomsman who recruited a wedding guest to invite Joe into the kitchen for his usual snack. And it all ended well, at least from Tom's and probably Joe's perspective. The bride and groom handled it with good cheer as well, I'm told, and they have a priceless wedding anecdote to tell for years to come. And I have one for this sermon. The mother of the bride, well, I can't say with certainty that she ever recovered. Most folks and premarital couples with whom I've shared this story have gotten a good chuckle from it, as well as a "there but for the grace of God go I" moment of recognition. But one person didn't think it was funny in the least. In fact, she felt just awful for the beleaguered mother of the bride and pronounced the wedding utterly ruined. Ironically, her own wedding at the Ocean View Inn in Gloucester, Massachusetts, many summers ago, was harmlessly interrupted by that familiar calliope-like melody of an ice cream truck passing by on the road between the inn and the beach. The driver slowed down, smiled, waved, and everyone, including the bride and the groom and me, the officiant, we waved back. To this day, the bride apparently is bitter about the ice cream truck interruption and seems perplexed why so many of her guests, and yours truly, remember that moment as sweet, joyful, spontaneous, and touching. Maybe the perfect club has room for one more. My response to that bride was this: whether the wedding was ruined or not, whether any moment in our lives is good or bad, a disaster or a triumph, depends quite a lot on our expectations. Do we still expect a perfect world free of glitches and messiness? That everything will always work out as we planned? That reality is going to cooperate on cue? That a fault line runs under every living room but ours? And if so, are we destined to sit stunned and devastated whenever the unexpected and the messy galumps down the center aisle of our lives in a snorkel mask, looks us squarely in the eye, and demand that we shove over? Or instead, might we find a way to shove over and endure on our own and with the help of our companions? My Rye colleague, Dave Maynard, suggests wisely that expectations are premeditated resentments. Think about it, he writes. Much of my growing up was based around expectations. My expectations were of recognition, money, love, Christmas presents, friendship, success, and adventures. While I usually reconciled to reality, most often there would be a negative edge. Why could it not be the way I imagined? And so forth. The problem wasn't not in the reality, he concludes. It was in my expectations, premeditated resentments. Perhaps this explains the mother of the bride's reaction to Joe as he stood at the end of her pew, urging her to shove over. Premeditated resentments. Despite Martha Stewart and others' success in selling the prospect of achievable perfection, such an outcome doesn't hold up very well in the harsh light of reality and just leads to more premeditated resentments. This is especially true as 2021 dawns and we've endured a most imperfect 2020. Certainly not what we expected, was it? In my view, life, reality, the human condition are a lot more like Roomie describes them in his poem. This being human is a guest house, he muses. Every morning is a new arrival, a joy, a meanness, an unexpected visitor. Although he does never mention explicitly a snorkel mask. Life involves us humans who are by definition flawed, including ministers, I might add. And that is why perfect clubs go out of business so quickly. An acknowledgement of this important distinction between perfection and reality goes back to ancient times. Plato, for one, put out the wise philosophy that only the idea of something can be perfect, but in its realization, its expression in worldly terms, it's always a mere shadow of that perfect idea. We catch a glimpse of this Platonic ideal in the creation story from Genesis too. After all, during the week-long process of creation, the God of Hebrew scripture inspects his daily endeavors and he pronounces them good. Not perfect, mind you, just good. An A+ over B- kind of effort with imperfection built right in. Should the mother of the bride, should any of us expect more from our human endeavors or from reality itself? On this point, I agree with the Reverend Ken Sawyer, who was my mentor early on in my own ministry, who has preached that mostly what we should have hopes of achieving, of being, of experiencing, of expecting of others is something good enough to bring a smile, calm an anguish, kindle a hope, foster justice, and lighten despair. Good enough and realistic enough to satisfy the soul not over-expectant. I love that idea and his wording, a soul not over-expectant. That would be a soul who considers how our blessedly imperfect lives are part of creation and as such are good and good enough, but also annoyingly messy and unpredictably chaotic. Are you nodding now in recognition? The upside is that we have been endowed with the amazing human capacity to be vibrant, resilient, and creative in the face of that messiness. Our human predicament is a little like a lost cat ad in England that has made the rounds for years on the internet and reads, "Lost cat, old, mangy, one-eyed, limped, neutered, crippled." Answers to the name Lucky. Life is like that. At times it will rain on our parades or our weddings, but most of the bad stuff, and COVID especially, we hope, is survivable. And life is more a blessing than a curse. Some occurrences are grossly unfair, truly awful messes that leave a stubborn stain. And then again, some moments are truly splendid. There is a fault line running under us right here, right now in this YouTube sanctuary. And from my virtual pulpit, I'm looking out on a congregation of people who, like myself, have felt their share of shifts and tremors in their utterly human, inevitably imperfect lives, and who, in the process, have come to know or are coming to know the difference between real suffering and life's little irritations and setbacks. I must admit that in my younger years, especially in my 30s, I lacked that perspective and aspired to be a charter member of the Perfect Club. Yet after experiencing a bunch of those genuinely breathtaking and humbling shove over experiences, the kind that really knock you to your knees, I have come to more easily accept, willingly accept, that a human life is composed of good news and bad news, and that a perfect life is an oxymoron and a boring one to boot, not to mention tyrannical. The great cosmic knee slap in the research, has shown us that perfectionism actually undermines performance, blunts creativity and flexibility, ramps up self-absorption and anxiety, and limits us socially. Perfection truly is, in Voltaire's words, the enemy of the good and the good enough. Making mistakes and being okay with that leads to innovation, self-acceptance, and greater happiness. Even so, in our achievement-focused society, there is still an urge in many of us to get it just right. We want there to be no loose strands, no rough edges, no mistakes, no suffering. And sometimes we come pretty close to that goal, and we're surprised in our disappointment in the product. Something is missing. As my colleague Clark Wells would say, we've tamed the life out of it. To be sure, I would never stand here, ever, and suggest that suffering is good for us, because I don't believe that. However, I will suggest that if we can resist the urge to tame life's rougher edges as a soul over-expectant, we can often move forward to affirm as best we can the incomplete and the imperfect. Indeed, that fault line just keeps shifting. The uninvited visitors keep knocking on the door or storming down the center aisle of our lives, demanding that we shove over at the most inopportune moments. Learning is struggling. This is a tough time in which we need to be gentle with ourselves. Living deliberately and deeply, as Thoreau would put it, and sucking all the marrow out of life is messy. But precisely because of this tension and exertion, we learn. To avert the struggle is to avert the learning and the growth. When life barks, shove over, We learn things about ourselves, about our adaptability, our tolerance, inner resilience, our maturity, our sense of humor and perspective, our integrity, and our faith, for good and for ill. In a way, we waste those shove-over moments if we gloss over, deny, avoid, rage against, or neglect their message. In the end, I think it's a matter of attitude and a matter of faith, a decision to affirm, even when we have been shoved over to the point of bruising, what of value, joy, and sacredness still remains with us. To allow ourselves to be consecrated to the unexpected, in the words of the Reverend John Nichols. To live in the layers, not the litter, with a dynamic hope, come what may. It's a willingness to hear and to answer a simple but ultimately empowering question. This is your one blessedly imperfect life, messes, mistakes, and all. How will you live it? What will you do with it? I think the answer is to look the visitor in the snorkel mask squarely in the eye with as much resilience, grace, and honesty as we can muster, and then to shove over and make room for whatever sits down. Illness, divorce, loss, boredom, joy, regret, success, uncertainty, amazement, failure, fear, loneliness, love, wonder. Like Roomie advises, welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house clear of furniture. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. However, while we're adjusting to that unexpected visitor who's taken up residence in the seat to our left, we mustn't neglect to keep looking for lifelines and support in these virtual pews to our right and left and all around us. It's harder right now, but that is where our strength continues to be. The tender strands of love that bend and stretch and hold you in the web of life that is torn but always healing. Those are the words of my late colleague, the Reverend Robbie Walsh. As a faith community, we're imperfect people who have pledged to help one another make a more imperfect world more human, more bearable, more gracious, and more real. And what commitment, what goal could be more fitting for this week? Making an imperfect world more human, more bearable, more gracious, more just, more real. Often the best we can do in this permanently imperfect world is to increase the odds of something human happening. And certainly those odds are greatly increased when we band together. We're not the perfect club here at Beacon, and thank goodness for that. In fact, we're not a club at all. We're a beloved community. So look within yourselves and then look around you. Come to the post-service gathering and see some of the faces of Beacon in real time during this period when we cannot look from right to left in our sanctuary. But most likely somewhere in this virtual sanctuary, in your next Zoom meeting, at a concert online, there is someone who, when push comes to shove, would recognize their own imperfection and vulnerability in yours and would willingly go out to the kitchen with your unexpected visitor to get some potato chips. So let's be sure to keep plenty on hand. And let's be sure to say, bless you. Blessed be. Blessed we, and amen.
Please join me in singing Everything Possible. table, leftovers saved, wash the dishes and put them away. I've told you a story, tucked you in tight, at the end of your knockabout day. As the moon sets its sail to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you choose. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some follow behind, some go in their own way and time. Some women love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can dream all the day, never reaching the end of everything possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by taunts, by games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends the best part of yourself, they'll give the same back to you. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
The spirit of generosity and gratitude flows through Beacon. Whether we're here on YouTube or here in our sanctuary on North LaRue Street, we take an offering each week to support Beacon and its programs. There are two ways you can donate. You can go to our website, beaconuu.com, find the donate button, and make a secure online donation through the Vanco application. If you use this method, we ask that you use a bank account rather than a credit card to save us some fees. There'll be more for us to support us during this time. Or you can send a check to 510 North LaRue Street, Flagstaff, Arizona, 86001, with offering in the note. Either way, we are so appreciative of your generosity, especially during this time. And finally, at the end of our service, we come together, we hold hands, we stand in a circle, and we feel the power, the strength, and the connection of this community. So we have been doing that virtually, imagining ourselves in a circle, holding hands, feeling that connection. So I invite you to do that now. And remember that whether we are together or we are apart, we are Beacon, always connected. Stay safe and well. Linda has some closing words for us. Continue by Maya Angelou. Blessed be blessed we continue. Amen.
Continue by Maya Angelou. My wish for you is that you continue to be who and how you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness. Continue to allow humor to lighten the burden of your tender heart. Continue in a society dark with cruelty to let the people hear the grandeur of the sacred in the peals of your laughter. Continue to let your eloquence elevate the people to heights they had only imagined. Continue to remind the people that each is as good as the other, and that no one is beneath you or nor above you. Continue to remember your own young years and look with favor upon the lost and the least and the lonely. Continue to put the mantle of your protection around the bodies of the young and defenseless. Continue to take the hand of the despised and diseased and walk proudly with them. In the high street, some might see you and be encouraged to do likewise. Continue to plant a public kiss of concern on the cheek of the sick and the aged and infirm, and count that as a natural action to be expected. Continue to let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel, to say your nightly prayer, and let faith be the bridge you build to overcome evil and welcome good. Continue to ignore no vision which comes to enlarge your range and increase your spirit. Continue to dare to love deeply and risk everything for the good thing. Continue to float happily in the sea of infinite substance, which set aside riches for you before you had a name. Continue, and by doing so, know that you and your work will be able to continue eternally.